Welcome to the Campfire Series podcast, Theater Edition. I'm your host, Logan Soforenko. Thank you so much for staying loyal with us. We are almost at 6 months old. I have a very special guest joining us on this week's episode of Theater, Broadway, film, you name it, entertainment veteran. Please welcome Eric Petersen.
Hello, how's it going? So my name is Eric Petersen. I am an actor and a singer, and I live in Los Angeles, California currently. I have lived in New York City and Los Angeles back and forth multiple times. We've moved our family between the two cities, I believe 5 or 6 times between the coasts, because I do a lot of stuff on Broadway. I've also done a lot of TV film work here in LA. Some of my larger credits, I suppose, would be I've done 4 Broadway shows. I was in Shrek the musical in New York, and I was the standby for the role of Shrek, and then played the role of Shrek for a year on the first national tour of Shrek the musical, which ended in LA, which is why and when we moved to LA. I then went back to New York to do the play Peter and the Starcatcher on Broadway, which was an amazing show. Did that for about 8 months. Then came back to LA to do a TV show called Kirsty that was on TV Land. And it starred myself, Kirstie Alley, Michael Richards, and Rhea Perlman, which was a very exciting experience. And then did some more TV stuff here, did some Modern Family, Big Bang Theory, CSI, NCIS, a bunch of Disney Channel shows. I did the Coen Brothers film, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which was nominated for an Oscar, which was very cool. And then I went back to New York in 2016 to do School of Rock on Broadway, and I played Dewey Finn, the Jack Black role, for a year, and then I actually dovetailed that directly into the Jimmy Buffett musical Escape to Margaritaville, where I originated the role of Brick on Broadway. And then when Margaritaville ended, I moved back to LA, which is where I am now, and I am currently set to go back to the East Coast to start shooting a TV show for AMC network that's called Kevin Can F Himself. You can figure out what the F stands for. And that's going to be starring myself and Annie Murphy, who played Alexis on Schitt's Creek. She plays my wife. I play Kevin. And it's a really cool show that will be coming out at some point, but we're starting shooting now, which is exciting because in light of everything with COVID, not a lot of people are working in the entertainment business. So I feel very blessed to have a job coming up.
Well, looking forward to and sending lots of thoughts and love and support and prayers as that hopefully goes really well and it's super safe. But with that being said, working through the resume a little bit, when you went back to New York for School of Rock, you played Dewey, and most theater people, as you probably see on Instagram, I recognize you from the mashup that you guys did with Phantom and Cats and that whole joint little spiel. But tell us a little bit about your time with the School of Rock.
Sure. So I had auditioned for the original. I don't think I auditioned for the first reading. They've done some readings prior to that. But I auditioned for it when it was coming to Broadway originally. I didn't get it, but they liked me, I guess. And so I was back living in LA at the time when Alex Brightman was sort of finishing up his run. He'd been in it for about a year. And so they were looking for a replacement. They called me to come back in and audition, and I did, and got it, which was very exciting. And I loved it. I love that movie, obviously. I love that show. I loved working with the kids. I'm a dad myself. I have 2 young kids. I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. So I love kids. I love working with kids, like mentoring kids. I'm wearing a coach shirt literally right now. I coach my son's soccer team. I like being a teacher and that kind of stuff. So the working with the kids in the Broadway cast was awesome and really filled my heart up. I really enjoyed that. The adult cast was spectacular as well, but the role of Dewey really is with the kids almost the whole show. So I was in it for about a year. I think I did 11 months because I was supposed to do a year contract, but then I got out a month early because as I said, I was going into Margaritaville, and just the dates had to work out that way. It is one of the hardest shows that I've ever done, both physically and vocally. Shrek was maybe a little bit physically harder because I was wearing a 50-pound fat suit. But the amount of energy that it took to play Dewey Finn was intense. I mean, there's so much running and jumping off of desks and picking kids up and playing guitar and jumping off of amps and sliding around on your knees on the stage that I found that if I did anything more than like lay prone and silent all day, I would feel it in the show at night. Like if I just went for a little walk with my kids, not that it would be hard to do, but in the show, when we'd be getting to near the end of Act 2, I'd be like, whew, I shouldn't have gone for that walk today, because I'm like, it literally took my energy tank level from full to completely empty every single night. And I remember when I joined the cast, so I only did the evening shows. I was in 5 shows a week, which is very odd. Most Broadway shows are 8 shows a week, and everybody in the cast does 8 shows in the week. There are some harder roles that will only do maybe 6 shows a week or 7 shows a week. But I never heard of only doing 5 shows a week. I was like, that's crazy. And I remember when they gave me the contract, they were like, all right, so it's 5 shows a week. And I was like, I can do more than 5 shows. Like I'm a professional. I can handle this. And I remember after like just a week or 2 weeks, I was like, oh yeah, this makes total sense why you could only do 5 shows a week. You definitely couldn't sing that show twice in a day. It just was so vocally taxing, because it wasn't just that the songs are high and rock singing, which is, stressful in the voice, but also all of the scenes, almost every scene, you're like, guys, come on, we got to get to the battle of the bands. And so you're like shredding your voice constantly for 2.5 hours. So it was a very hard show to do, but incredibly, incredibly rewarding. I loved being able to like do a rock concert at the end of the show every night, essentially, which was awesome. And it's funny that you brought up the mashup that we did with Phantom and Cats. So what that was for was Sunset Boulevard was opening on Broadway with Glenn Close. And so that was going to be marking this point where Andrew Lloyd Webber had 4 shows on Broadway at the same time, because he had School of Rock, Phantom of the Opera, Cats, and then Sunset Boulevard. And to sort of celebrate that, they came to us and they're like, all right, so we're going to do this mashup, and we're going to do it on the School of Rock stage, and we're going to sing You're in the Band for Good Morning America, but there's going to be characters from Phantom of the Opera, characters from Cats are all going to come in. And I remember when we were reading through the music and talking about it, I was like, this is either going to be the biggest shit show in the world or it's going to be awesome. I was like, it can only go one of 2 ways, because this is either going to be such a mess or it's going to be really cool. And I think it ended up being really cool. But as it was coming together, I was like, wait, what? And then a cat is going to jump over the desk? Okay, sure, let's do
it. When it came to after your time with School of Rock, you joined the original Broadway company of Escape to Margaritaville and originated Brick. I saw the tour in Hollywood. Great show. I unfortunately get to see it on Broadway, but I interviewed fellow cast member of Margaritaville, Allison Luff, and y'all told me how awesome it is working with Jimmy Buffett. So I kind of want to hear your adventures of working with the creative team and, like, obviously meeting Jimmy Buffett and, performing in a theater that's in the 3rd floor of a hotel and the Marriott Marquis. So what was that like with Escape to Margaritaville?
There was a lot of really cool parts of doing Margaritaville. Number one was probably that it was my first originating a role, original Broadway cast, which to me is like that was a big benchmark that I really wanted to cross off my bucket list of my career. It was my 4th Broadway show, but every other Broadway show I had joined after it had already opened. So I never had like an official opening night on Broadway. And like, I'd been to my friends, but I never had one for myself. So that was really cool. And, another cool part was I was in Margaritaville from the very, very first reading in let's see, we opened Margaritaville on Broadway in 2017, and I think I started doing readings of it in 2014, maybe. So it was quite a few years, and there was only like me, Lisa Howard, Andre Ward. I think we're the only three that had been in it from the very first reading. And then, so I had done readings of it for 3-4 years. And then when they were going to do it at La Jolla Playhouse, which it was super well received in La Jolla, and they did a lot of work on the show while they were there. They wanted me to do it, but I got offered School of Rock in New York, and I was like, I think I have to go star in this Broadway show rather than doing the out-of-town tryout. And I just said, I hope that you come back to me when you come to Broadway, and because I obviously had done a lot of work on the show and originating the character and everything. And I was really happy that when they came back to Broadway, they came back to me and said, we'd love for you to do it. So that was really cool. And then also probably the coolest part was that I had been a Parrot head since I was a kid. My parents are both enormous Jimmy Buffett fans. I have been to more Jimmy Buffett concerts than I've been to any other artist. And I have all these pictures of me from like being a very young kid and going to Buffett shows. And my parents had a boat and we just listened to Jimmy Buffett all the time. So he was like a huge part of my life and my childhood. And then getting to not only meet him, but work with him very closely and become very friendly with him. And I got to introduce my parents to him, and that was like really cool for them. And so the whole experience was this great story where when we were doing one of the readings, my dad, who's like, I'm from Chicago. My dad's a very like Midwest guy, doesn't tell his emotions very much, just kind of like, just says, hey, how you doing? Kind of gruff and everything. And he said to me, he was so excited that I was doing this Margaritaville reading. And he was like, so what songs do you get to sing? Do you get to sing a lot of songs? And I was like, yeah. And I was giving him the list of the songs that my character sang. And one of them was Ragtop Day, which is this great song. And my dad like got a little teary on the phone, and he was like, oh. And I was like, what's up? He's like, I don't know if you remember this, but when you were really little, we used to drive around in my convertible, which is like a ragtop. We used to drive around in my convertible, and you and I would sing that song when you were like, 6, 7 years old. And I was like, oh man, I don't really remember that. He's like, it was one of my favorite memories of you as a kid. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then I told Jimmy Buffett that story, that my dad was like so excited about me singing that particular song. And then Jimmy Buffett started crying and was like, that means so much to me. And he's like, you tell your dad that I'm so happy and I love him, and like this is so happy. I'm just so happy this is all happening. So then I told my dad that Jimmy Buffett had sent him a message, and my dad started crying again. It was good. It was good vibes all around.
When it comes to these different types of shows, because you've done the shows that you mentioned, in your little introduction, they're all very different styles. I think, and when it comes to doing Escape to Margaritaville, what was the reception you got in New York, and finally being on this long journey from first read-throughs in 2014 to finally taking it to the marquee, and what was that like?
Yeah, so it was, the opening night was great. We did this, it was kind of interesting. We did what was called a mini tour before we did Broadway. So they'd done all the readings, they did the production at La Jolla, and then we did a 3-month tour where we played New Orleans, Chicago, and Houston. So we did each one for about a month. And then we came to New York and opened in New York. Which was really cool for the cast to, like, when you tour with a show, you become so close with the cast. And so like we all came in feeling very much like a family and a huge, very, very tight-knit group. The best part of that show was that it really was just fun. It was just easy fun. It did not take itself very seriously. The whole point of it was for you to just let the like mood of the show kind of wash over you and make you feel relaxed and kind of on island time, and like go get a drink and like just be chill, right? When we got to New York, the reception was mixed, to be totally honest. There was the people that were Parrot heads had the time of their life. It was like the greatest celebration of that lifestyle and Jimmy Buffett and the music and everything. And they went nuts and loved it and just were having the greatest time of their life. snobby New Yorkers were a little like, what is what is this show that's just about like drinking margaritas and there's tap dancing zombies running around? Like, what is happening? And so it was kind of this weird, and we could feel that, and it was an odd feeling that like some nights you'd be like, oh, we have a parrot head audience. And if you even had a few parrot heads in the audience, they would kind of goad the rest of the people in the space to sort of like chill and just let the show do what it wanted to do. But if you didn't have a few people that kind of gave permission to like just relax and have fun and laugh and stuff, and you just tried to look at it as a serious theatrical piece, then you're in trouble, because it's not what it was and it's not what it was trying to be. So it really was, it was this odd mix. And then, when we closed, it was a sad moment, because we all really loved the show and we loved working together. But I think all of us look back on it incredibly fondly and don't have any negative memories of it.
That's really good, because I love that show. That was such a fun time.
Yeah.
But wait, one second, let me grab it real quick.
Sure.
The beach ball that you guys throw at the end.
Yes. And now, if you saw it in Hollywood, did they drop any from the ceiling, or did they just throw some from the stage?
They threw them from the stage, because the Dolby's pretty.
Yes, it's very high.
Yeah.
I will say, in New York, that was one of the coolest parts. Is we had like these nets above the whole all the audience in the marquee, and they would drop like 700 beach balls every night. And so like when it got to that finale and all these beach balls would just drop onto the audience, it was epic. It was so fun.
Well, that sounds like a really fun time. It's good that you're, a couple of years past it now, and all good memories, and it's just such a fun show. And kind of segueing into the regional production that you most recently did of Something Rotten at Musical Theater West, the first licensed regional production of it, under the direction of Josh Grissetti. You played Nick Bottom. What was that process like? Because it was a pretty big show, and it was regional. So what was that all about?
That was super fun. It was funny how that one came together. Musical Theater West is a very renowned regional theater here in LA that does big, full-scale Broadway type musicals. And I never worked with them. I had lots of friends who had done stuff with them, but I had never worked with them, never had the chance. And it was something that I was sort of looking to do at some point when the opportunity was right. And a friend of mine, Ben Schrader, who's a fellow Broadway guy that now lives in LA, was supposed to play Nick Bottom, and because they cast most of their stuff months ahead of time. And so he was supposed to play Nick Bottom, and he got like a 3-episode arc on a Disney Channel show and had to back out, because those productions are like, I think you do 9 days of rehearsal and then you run for like 3 or 4 weekends. So it just, with the TV thing, it was not going to work out. And so they were kind of freaking out, and they sent out this big like bulletin on Facebook of like, emergency casting. We need a lead for Something Rotten. Anybody that please send this out to anybody. And so I had a friend who was our stage manager on Shrek, and she used to be a stage manager at MTW. And so she sent it to me, and she was like, "Hey, you'd be great in this part. Like, would you want to do this?" And I was like, "Oh, I love that show. I saw it on Broadway and I loved it. And Brian was so good in it. And so I'd love to go, talk to them about it." And then I looked, and it was Josh Grissetti was directing it. And I knew Josh from New York. And so I sent him a text, and I was like, "Hey man, I live in LA now, and I'm available if you would want to do work with me." And he was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you were in LA. I thought you were in New York." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm here." And he's like, "Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so then it happened. But then I think we started 2 days later, and it was 9 days of rehearsal and like super, super fast rehearsal process, and then did the show. But it was super fun. The cast was great. That show was great. The songs are so fun. It was a great time.
Considering our production struggled to get it together in somewhat 2 months, 9 days just sounds crazy, also crazy fun, and it's a really fun show. And I saw on your Instagram story, I think it was, or Instagram post a couple of days ago or a week, you got some sort of award for Nick Bottom. What was that?
The this guy Steve Stanley is a theater critic and a reviewer here in LA, and he does these things called the Cine Awards, which are all for all kinds of LA theater with cabaret stuff and large scale stuff, small scale stuff, and so there's lots of winners that he chooses, and one of them was me for, I think, lead actor in a large scale musical for Something Wrong.
Well, congratulations on that. And you mentioned, Brian did such a good job on Nick Bottom on Broadway, and Brian also did Shrek. So now that's a couple of parts that he had to originate, and you also got to work on. Let's flash back way back to Shrek back in 2009 2010. What was that process like, being a standby and then going into the tour, like, and how did they differentiate?
Yeah. So Shrek was my first Broadway show, so I have obviously a huge affinity for it and love for it. Yeah, so I joined the Broadway company of Shrek as a medical leave replacement for 12 weeks. It was supposed to be 12 weeks. And I was playing Papa Ogre and one of the Three Little Pigs. There was a guy who was in the show who hurt his knee, I think, and he had to be out for 12 weeks. And so I was just going in for like a quick replacement. I did those 12 weeks, which I think ended up turning into like 16 weeks or 18 weeks or something like that. And then that guy came back because his injury had healed, and he was out of the show and was coming back in. So I had like a month-long break that I wasn't in the show, and then Brian Darcy James left the show to go on to his next project, and Ben Crawford, who's currently the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera on Broadway, was the standby. Ben then became Shrek, and I became the standby, so I was back in the company. It was very exciting. So being a standby, for anybody that might not know, there's understudies, there's swings, and there's standbys. Basically, the difference between them all is a swing is somebody who knows all of the ensemble tracks. And if somebody in the ensemble is sick, a swing will step in and cover those ensemble tracks. An understudy is usually somebody who is in the ensemble who covers one of the principal roles. And if one of the principals is out, an understudy from the ensemble will step up and play their role, and then a swing would come in and cover their role in the ensemble. A standby is different than both of those. A standby is only covering one role, usually the title or main character of a show. Not all shows have standbys. Really, it only is needed if you have a role that is so pivotal to the show and so sort of labor intensive that you need someone who is like solely focused on it, right? So, there's a standby for Elphaba, there's a standby for Shrek, there might be a standby for Phantom, I'm not sure. But it's this odd role because you go to the theater every night, you have your own dressing room like a principal actor, but you're not in the show at all. And so you're just sort of waiting in the wings, ready to go on should something happen to the lead actor. But it's this odd feeling of like being a part of the company, but really not. You feel very kind of separate because you don't have the inside jokes of being on stage and backstage and like, oh, did you see somebody trip over the thing? Like you're just not there. You're like up in your dressing room. So it was an odd experience. I'm glad I did it because it was informative and I learned a lot about myself and about the show and being an actor in that capacity. And then I did feel ready to then when they did auditions for the first national tour, that I went in and I felt like I had a good grasp on who Shrek was. And I was really lucky and blessed to get cast as Shrek and then did it for a whole year on tour.
I don't know how far you've been, an actor as also a dad. What is that responsibility? Obviously performing a lot, and if I'm following your work correctly, it hasn't been too or as heavy as normal like 8 show week. But what is that responsibility, and what's it like being a not just Broadway actor, but just a working professional like actor in all sorts of fields, but also being a dad?
That's a great question, and I love talking about it because I love being a dad so much. I always wanted to be a dad. I remember even when I was like 9 years old and I was playing like little league soccer, I'd be like, I can't wait till I'm the coach and I have a kid like play like that. I just have always thought that way. I love being a dad. I love that my kids get to see lots of different sides of me through parts that I play. I like that. Especially with TV stuff, and I mean, it's, I guess, more with TV stuff, because TV stuff is kind of like you work really hard for a couple of weeks and then you're off. Could be for months at a time, and then you work really hard. Um, I get a lot of time at home with my kids, so I get to pick them when we're not in a pandemic. I get to take them to school and pick them up from school and play with them and stuff. So I don't have, the job of like a stockbroker where I leave before they're up and I come home like just for dinner. Like I really am very involved in their lives. It obviously puts a lot of pressure on myself and my wife, that like, I remember when it was just the two of us, there was a sort of romanticism to like being a poor, not working actor, struggling actor, that there was like, oh, we're roughing it. We're going to make it big someday, But once you have kids, like you have that responsibility to provide food and clothing and shelter for them. So it does put a certain amount of pressure on your creative life, that you're like, I need to be good and I need to get work. And so that is hard. But the best thing about it, I think, is in regards to when you're a professional actor, like I always say this when I teach kids, I say, like college kids, I'm like, I have a pretty good career. I've been able to support myself and a family of three other people for going on almost 20 years, essentially only as an actor. So that means I'm doing pretty well. And in light of that, my career had super high highs and super low lows, and it really is a roller coaster. It sounds like a cliche, but it's true. The highs are really high and the lows are really low. And the thing that I found since having kids is that when I might be on a career high and think like, man, I am so good and things are so good and I'm an important guy and everything that I'm doing is golden, and I can get a little full of myself, my kids don't care. That like when they were babies, they'd still puke on your shirt. They don't care that like you're on a TV show or something, right? Like they're just, that stuff doesn't matter to them. So it keeps you at zero. It keeps you at a much more level place. And on the other side of that is when my career might be in the dumps and I'm like, I'm never going to work again. I haven't worked for 2 months and no one's ever going to cast me. My kids love me and think I'm the greatest thing in the world. So that brings me up. So I like it because it gives me this like baseline through my life and through my career that can have these ups and downs that let me know that like, this is what's really important.
I really appreciate that. It's kind of inspiring because I don't really get the chance to talk to many performers that are parents, and especially your craft is still going, and you have a project coming up with even in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic. You want to share a little bit about, you don't have to share too much about the story, obviously, but like and what are some precautions that the industry's taking in your next project? Trying to shoot during COVID, and what's that gonna be like? Is your wife like obviously okay with it, and all that stuff?
So I actually just got off a call with some of our production people right before I called you. It's going to be crazy and different and intense, I'm sure. We're going to be shooting in Boston because our show takes place in Boston. We have a soundstage there. And basically, it's not like a hermetically sealed bubble, but there's not going to be visitors. There's not going to be set visits from agents or family or friends or anything. It's going to be pretty much people that are working on the show are in the soundstage. If you're not, you're not there. They told us we're going to be getting tested 3 times a week for COVID. And then obviously every day we'll have, excuse me, temperature checks and making sure that you don't have any symptoms or anything. So it's going to be, and I think like even the other actors, when we're doing scenes, it'll probably be when we're rehearsing, we might still be wearing masks. And then like right up until they're like, all right, we're ready to shoot, then we'll take off the PPE and act as normal, and my family is going to go with me, which is great, because I wouldn't want to be away from them for too long. Um, yeah, I think it's going to be great. I think our show is going to be on AMC, and AMC is really taking like severe precautions and being really smart about it. And there's all kinds of air filters in the studio, and they're really, I think, going to do it right, which is exciting. And the show itself is really cool. It is. It's called Kevin Can F Himself. And what it is it's an exploration of the classic sitcom wife. So essentially, you know how in most sitcoms, the husband is usually like an overweight kind of doofy husband, and he's got some beautiful wife, and he'll say like, "Hey babe, can you go grab me a beer in the kitchen?" And she'll be like, "Oh honey," and she'll roll her eyes and walk into the kitchen, and then we don't see her anymore. Our show really follows her into the kitchen and sees like, what is her life really like? And so what it's going to do is it has a mixture, which has never been done before, of multicam and single cam. So for those of you that may not know that term, a multicam show is shot with 4 cameras with usually a live studio audience. It would be any kind of sitcom that was like pre-2000. So Seinfeld, Friends, All in the Family, Cheers, all of those are multicam sitcoms. They're shot in a certain way. They have a certain rhythm to them. They look a certain way. And then a single cam sitcom would be like The Office or Parks and Rec, or anything that has a much more film-like quality to it. It's shot usually over the shoulder. You have to do coverage of both sides. There's no laugh track, all these things. And our show is going to go back and forth between multicam and single cam, showing basically when it's with my character Kevin, it's in multicam, and then when it's with Annie's character, the wife, it's going to be in single cam. So it's going to be this really cool like mixture of 2 styles to kind of inform each other.
I'm looking forward to seeing this. I don't really watch as many sitcoms. It's just kind of ironic in quarantine and coronavirus, but I'm really looking forward to seeing when that happens. And like I said before, sending lots of love and support for that process. But you mentioned you were in a project with Michael Richards. I have to ask, just because the Seinfeld fan in me, what was that like working with Cosmo Kramer?
He was awesome. I will say Michael was, to me, was such a great guy, and he was really he really kind of took me under his wing while we were shooting. He, obviously he'd done Seinfeld and had immense success. He had the issue at the comedy club after that and had not worked for about 10 years. So when we did Kirsty, this was his first job back. And he really was very appreciative to like have a job and have that job. And he had such a sweet, soft soul to him as a person. But then as a performer, he just like explodes with energy, and like, it's so cool. The thing that was most interesting about Michael is that I would have assumed, watching his stuff on Seinfeld for years, that he was a incredibly impulsive actor, that like if he would do a take, he would do it 10 different ways each time, and it would just be like whatever he kind of felt in the moment he would just do, right? That's how I thought he worked, because it seemed so impulsive and organic. But seeing him work, he crafted every tiny little gesture, every eyebrow raise. I remember in the pilot of that series that one of our first interactions together was my character like sat on a couch and he was sitting next to me, and he wanted to do a little bit of me. It wasn't even in the script, of me like that. When I sat down, I kind of sat on his suit jacket, and he wanted to like kind of pull his suit jacket up, like, don't sit on my jacket. Little tiny thing. We practiced it for about an hour and a half, because he was like, he tried every single permutation of like, did he want to like look at me and then pull out the jacket? Did he want to like pull out the jacket and look at me? Did he want to like slowly pull out the jacket and give me like a death stare? And he tried all these different things to be like, oh, okay, this kind of works. Let's do this. And then a look. And so he was crafting it like a sculptor. And it wasn't just an impulsive, like, oh, I'm just going to do it. And seeing that was so cool, to see a comedic genius really like doing their craft. To me was awesome.
Well, it sounds like you've had just so much fun throughout your career. And before we wrap up, what is some you teach, so you probably give us a lot of advice. What's some advice you can give to young performers in any sort of acting/performing field?
The biggest thing would be don't rush yourself. I know when we're young, we all want to do everything, and we think we can do everything, and we want to like get to the big time right away. The more that you can exist where you are right now and like savor that moment. If you're in high school, love that you're in high school and soak everything up, all the memories and all the education, all the learning, all the wisdom that you can. Don't be like, oh, I just can't wait till I get to college. No, be happy that you're in high school. When you're in college, love that you're in college and make mistakes and try things and like realize, try to have as much as you can the perspective. There's the old saying of like youth is wasted on the young, right? As you get older, you get more perspective and you start to like look back at your times in your life and be like, oh man, that was the best time. That was the best time. But when you're young, it's hard to do that. But the most that you can, if you're able, enjoy the spot that you are. Make good connections with the people around you. Be kind, be smart, be attentive, have a positive outlook on things, and try to be helpful and just enjoy where you are. And then when you get to the next rung on the ladder, the next station in life, whatever that may be, love that. But don't be worried about getting to the next thing. So often we're like, well, how do I get to Broadway? Or how do I get to this? How do I get to that? Just be happy where you are. And if you are a good person and you're fun to work with and people enjoy being around you and you bring positivity and joy to everything you do, the next rung will come. And then you can enjoy that and be positive and be a good person to work with. And then the next rung will come. But don't get so fixated on trying to get to the next part of your life or your career.
I think it couldn't have been said any better like that. That was perfect. I really appreciate that. But Eric, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and talking to, college student looking to get some advice and, stay connected in the theater community by, getting some awesome advice and hearing some good conversation and obviously fun stories from your career. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You stay safe, and I'll let you know when the episode drops. And in the meantime, obviously stay safe and stay positive.
You too, bud.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too.